welcome back to the show. This is the Mental Breakdown. I'm your host, Joey Velez. Happy Thursday. Week's almost over. Weekend's right around the corner, but we got one more day. So finish strong, do what you got to do to make sure Friday is as productive as the rest of the week was, and then, use the weekend as your time to relax. So today I'm going to be joined by a very special guest. His name is Zyon Pullin. So I actually met him back in high school. He was on the varsity team as a freshman, so I got to coach him for a couple years as he was growing up. But he has an interesting journey, So he didn't get a lot of looks out of high school, but he found his way to UC Riverside and spent 4 years playing basketball there, where he accumulated over 1,300 points, had almost a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which is pretty good for a point guard. And then as a senior, not only was he named to the All Academic team, but he was named to the first team All Big West. But then from there, he was a graduate transfer and spent a year at the University of Florida, where things didn't change. He had a very high assist to turnover ratio, one of the best the conference has ever seen. And then he was voted first team All SEC. And then he actually just got done finishing his first year in the professional ranks. So he got to spend some time in the G League performing there, and then got even a sniff of the NBA as well. So I think we can learn a lot from his journey about what his mentality was, what kept him going, and what got him to where he is today. So sit back, enjoy, and hopefully you learn something.
Yo,
There's my guy.
what's going on?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, and you?
I'm doing good, man. Just winding down the day. Can't complain.
Yeah.
We've had storms the last few days. Have you guys been getting anything up there?
I think last night we had some like hard rain that came through, but where are you staying at right now?
Wichita Falls. So I'm about 2 hours like northwest of Dallas-ish.
Okay.
Probably like 6 hours north of that, I think, something like that.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
we're supposed to have, and I don't know what this means, but we're supposed to have gorilla-sized hail tonight.
Oh
I've never
wow.
heard that term before.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be an experience for sure. I'm curious to see what that looks like.
Oh man, I hope it's not. Yeah, I do. We'll see what happens. If it's anything what I think it's going to be, then my car is not going to last. I know that much.
I was gonna say it might do some real damage.
Oh, for sure. Even and people about here are they're on top of it, like the mechanics and the people who do car detailing.
Yeah.
Once they see a little bit of car damage, they're putting notes on your car, like, "Hey, hail damage, I got you." So
Oh, for sure.
I'm
I
sure I'll get
believe
some on my car. Yeah. How's Memphis treating you?
Memphis has been good. Memphis
Yeah.
been no, I got no complaints. Just grateful to be here at the end of the day. So it's,
Yeah.
rehabbing right now. So just doing what I need to do. So
Okay. How long have you officially been up there?
I want to say January. I think I got up here January.
Okay.
I think that's when I, made the move from Sioux Falls to Memphis. So I think it was like towards that like end of December. I made that transition.
Okay. Yeah, we're definitely gonna talk a little bit about that too, because I was looking through not necessarily your stats, but just like your journey along the way to where you're
Yeah,
at now. So that's kind of why I want to get you on it, because I think people can learn a lot from high school you to where you are now. You
for
know.
sure.
But before I get into that, yeah, so thanks for being on, of course, making time for me. I know we've been trying to get at this for a little bit. Uh,
Yeah.
Season finally finished, unfortunately, but I knew that was a chance for us to connect a little bit. So yeah, appreciate you having you on.
Yeah. No,
Um,
glad the timing could work out. So,
Heck yeah. Before we get into anything, you kind of just talked about it, but what's something in your life that you're grateful for right now?
shoot, grateful to just be here another day. But I think just grateful for my supporting cast. Keep a small circle.
Yep.
And so, I'm just grateful to have, good people around me, and that's something, I strive to do is, keep a good circle. It's kind of been preached to me, going through this journey, and I think I've, done a good job. So I think just grateful to have that supporting cast through the highs and the lows, and I think it's helped me continue to be where I'm at, and hopefully only up from here. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably from the outside assume that like, hey, you're a professional basketball player, it's all good. It's like it's the easy life, when my guess is probably not that easy.
Oh yeah, there's a there's a lot to it, but no, it's a business that you learn real quick.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll probably get into it later. But just with my journey and all that stuff, you learn real quick that it could be it could be one way, one day, and then the next thing you could be in a totally different situation. And
Yeah.
just how quickly things like that change in this industry. So it has its perks for sure. But it's also you can find yourself in a tough situation real
Yeah.
quick. So
Yeah. Sounds like you got to be ready to adapt on the fly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So I'm gonna read off some stats because
Mhm.
I wanted to dive into your career a little bit, and I knew I knew what I was looking for. I just didn't know it was gonna be exactly like these numbers.
Mhm.
4 years at Riverside,
Yeah.
1,300 points, almost a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. First team All Big West as a senior, two-time All Academic team. Then you go to Florida, single season record for assist to turnover ratio, best mark by an SEC player in this decade. First team All SEC. Then you get to go play in the G League before you get to the Grizzlies, where you average 25-6.
Mhm.
Walk me through that journey.
It's where do I begin? Where do I begin? No, I think just kind of going from, high school, I guess kind of starts in high school, just kind of the situation I was in, going in with no Division I offers, into my senior year, really trying to figure out, what this basketball stuff looks like, whether I was gonna have
Yeah.
to go junior college. I know a bunch of D2 started talking to me, so I think I took my first visit that junior summer, going to senior year to William Jessup with one of my teammates,
Mhm.
which is, I want to say NAIA.
Yeah.
So I thought that was the path I was headed towards, just in terms of the interest. Fast forward middle of the year, the interest starts picking up, string a couple of good games together. Because I would say I got off to a slow start,
Hmm.
in high school. And then, San Jose State started recruiting me. UC Riverside finally ended up being the first school to, really offer me. Coach David Patrick. And so kind of just going through the process, I really trusted that coaching staff at Riverside, being the first school to, offer me, take that chance on, a guy like me and which I'm super grateful for. And
Yeah.
they presented me an opportunity to come in and work and earn my spot, and that's what I try to do. Starting freshman year was, I'd say I was playing pretty well. Was getting, I would say I was getting pretty good minutes as a freshman,
Yeah.
and then kind of towards conference, the minute situation kind of changed and it was definitely a challenge. I started, you start to question, things and I guess you could probably say a little self-doubt creeps in,
Yeah.
just in terms of, being a freshman, being young, being new to college, being away from the house. It's a different world going against,
Yeah.
grown men. Um, was tough. But I used it as, motivation, just keep working. That's kind of how I've always been. And then, DP, David Patrick, he left after my freshman year, got a job opportunity to, I want to say Power 5,
Okay.
level. And so Coach Mike McPile, he stayed, and ended up getting the head coaching job and, talked with him. He came and, visited me and made it clear that, he still wanted me to be a part of this thing. And, super grateful for him to, keep me along and stuff like that. And, me and him still talk to this day. I think I just talked to him yesterday.
Nice.
And I slowly continue to keep getting better. Went through the pre-draft process my junior year because I
Okay.
wanted when I was a senior, I wanted to be done. I told myself I was gonna be done after that senior year at Riverside.
Yeah.
Which I injuries. I got hurt during the year,
Yeah.
which was tough. I was out for, I want to say like 6 to 8 weeks,
Okay.
with an ankle sprain, and which was tough. Kind of just continue to stay with it. Going through that and whatever, ended up deciding I wanted to stay in the process, and go to the draft. But after talking it over, felt it was best to do another year. Coach Golden, recruited me and, same pipeline, same coaching tree that I was accustomed to. So,
Okay.
I ultimately felt, Florida was the best decision, coming down to it. And I felt like I just fit there the best with the players around me. I thought I could make them better.
I mean, it seemed like it watching you guys that year, like it seemed like you just kind of fit in almost
Yeah,
immediately.
no, we were. I think Coach Golden and them. They strive on just having good people, and stuff like that. And I think that aligns a lot with who I am. So it was easy to play with those guys, and they made me that transition moving from Cali to Florida. They made that transition pretty smooth. So
Yeah.
it was great to play in the SEC, and I think I really got challenged playing at that level, going from Big West to SEC competition and playing guys who, you know, are going to play at the next level. And I thought it was
Yeah.
great for my development, and I think I was able to develop, and ended up having the accolades to go with it. Clearly didn't have the success we wanted
Yeah.
as a unit, but I think it was just a great overall learning experience for not only myself but those guys as well. And then you see them now, they win the national championship. So
Yeah.
super excited for those guys, and you know it's been cool to see the transition. Me and my uncle joke about it all the time, like who would have thought I would have been playing in the SEC and being in that position? A kid from College Park,
Yep.
that, people don't make it out of. So, just, grateful for that experience and, being able to finally, play at that stage as well. So,
Yeah, and I think back to the times when, you were a freshman at College Park and I was coaching. So just seeing the progression from that to then all of a sudden this dude is on, I'm watching this dude on ESPN and he's holding his own. Like it was always cool to
yeah.
see. And I think you always had that work ethic with you. So I wasn't saying I wasn't surprised, but it was just cool to see like, okay, this kid's been grinding a whole lot and he's finally making it happen. So I think that was pretty cool to watch from my end for sure. And then even seeing what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Um, speaking of high school, so yeah, you got an offer pretty late in the game. Was that frustrating? Was it disappointing going through that? What was that like not knowing you were getting the attention you may have wanted?
Yeah, yeah. No, I was super tough. Just because
Yeah.
I knew behind the scenes and behind closed doors, I knew what I was doing in terms of the work ethic aspect of it and the work I was putting in. I felt like it was only a matter of time. And, I played some of those guys and played at that, being with Team Arsenal and KP. Um, I've seen myself hold my own against guys that were going Power Five, at the time. So
Yeah.
it was definitely tough. I think I seen on my phone like not too long ago, like the rankings that they used to have back in the day of just kids in the area. And I think I was like 37th best player.
In like
Uh,
in like the Bay Area?
yeah, like Bay
Yeah.
Area, like some like basically that whole like Northern California
Yeah.
rankings. I was like 37, and like when you look back at that class, I think only four of us went D1 or ended up playing Division 1 basketball. And I think like, clearly the other one who stands out is Keyshot with Miami.
Yeah.
And then, a couple other guys chance going through the process.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was kind of it was kind of crazy to see where I ended up, considering that these scouts around are saying I was the 37th best player. So I always use it as motivation. I always knew you know what I could do on the basketball floor, and I figured it was only a matter of time if I just kept putting my head down and working. Eventually all of it would take care of itself. So it was definitely tough and it was challenging just because you want to be a part of that. You see kids posting all these offers all the time, and
Yeah.
you start to lose sight of that a little bit. But finally, my time came. So
Yeah, and it's always tough because like when you're performing against the people that are getting the offers and you're doing just as much as them and you're scoring on them, you're checking them on defense, whatever it is, and like they're getting the looks and you're not, I gotta imagine it's like, well, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Like why am I not getting the same kind of attention these guys are getting?
yeah, no, for sure. And I do give a lot of credit to Coach Battle,
Yep.
as well as, KP, doing the workouts with them. But, also Coach Battle, I think he really Kind of the difference from my freshman, sophomore year to my junior, senior is like he really just put the ball in my hands and was like, had me develop as a point guard. And, I got to make mistakes. And, I think even the style I try to play at this level now is just like pace and, trying to play fast and, run and gun kind of, philosophy a little bit. I give a lot of credit to him because that's, really where it started. So I think,
Yeah.
that also, I think I was developing in the right way and at the right time to where, I was able, college coach were able to see it translate, at the next level. So
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Logan Ryan on here. I remember my junior year of high school, we got a new coach for my junior and senior year, and I didn't find out until I was assisting with Battle that he was like, "Hey man, like I applied for that job, but they
yeah,
chose the other guy over me." And in my head, I was like, "Damn it, dude! Like
for
I don't
sure.
like I don't know if I would have been able to handle Battle, but I feel like we vastly underperformed. And if we would have had him, I think we would have done a little bit better. But shout out Coach Battle, man! Like I loved everything he was about. Uh,
Yeah. No,
good.
I appreciate him. He set the tone, bro, early. I think there was like one shoot around or his first day. I think I showed up like I'd have to ask him. I showed up like right when it started or like whatever, I'm like just had my sophomore year, like everyone's gone, going into my
Yep.
junior year.
Yep.
And, you know, I would say like he used to say like the cool jacket, but like, I definitely rolled in there and he let's just say he wasn't a big fan of it. And basically, just set the tone early. And I think, it was really, him holding me accountable like that, regardless of, who I am and,
Yeah.
whatever, or what's expected of me. Um, I think really shaped my perspective on things also, just like, how I carried myself, after that moment. It was just like that little subtle thing, but like that's something I'll always remember. Is like my first experience with battle was just like, this isn't gonna, this isn't gonna fly. And
Yeah. Yeah. Nip it in the butt immediately. Like, hey, that's not what we're doing here. And I
oh, for
think
sure.
I think that was the one thing from him was like he did a good job at like establishing and creating a culture there.
Yeah,
Right.
100%.
The years he was there before you were there and the years he was there with you and then when you were gone, like he made sure that like guys understood here's how it's gonna be. If you don't like it, sorry, like then I don't
Yeah,
got time for you.
for sure.
I think you kind of just mentioned it, but what was one of those, well, like what's one lesson that he taught you that you still kind of take with you today?
I definitely say like that, like cool jacket philosophy a little bit. And I still talk to him to this day. Like he'll check in on me and stuff like that, and we have great conversations. But I think it was just I'd really say that just like not looking at myself differently or see myself above anyone else. Like just come in, we're gonna work. We're gonna play the right way. And I think really just establish like that, like you mentioned, that culture aspect that I try to I've been fortunate enough to be in a lot of great situations through my journey of where like culture is big, like regardless, like that's like the number one thing that they're looking for is like culture guy, and just guy who's going to put their hard hat on and just work. And I think he really established that early on. And I think he really just gave me like that belief that I'm capable of doing it, and like really trusting me to go out there and make decisions, and we're gonna live with those mistakes, whether they're good or bad. So I'd say those are the things like he just let me be free a little bit. And I
Yeah.
think it helped me later on in my career, especially, the older I got at Riverside, just playing like freaks. It was like I already played in a system like that and, played a certain way. So it was, once I got a little older and figured the game out a little bit, I was already kind of used to it.
Yeah, and I think that's huge on like just from a coaching side is like allowing people to make mistakes. Because if it comes to a point where it's like, hey, you make a mistake, you're coming out, or I'm not going to put the ball in your hands, well then it's not going to allow me to be the person that I feel like I can be, right? Like I'm
For
always going to
sure.
be holding back just a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, is that? Is that the way? Because how did you play before he got there? It sounds like the ball wasn't really in your hands too much, and then he came in and said, "Hey, no, here's what we're doing. Like, I see you got the skill set."
Yeah, yeah, we had because I mean we clearly had Roselle and those guys
Yep,
at the time who super talented and were the featured guys, had been there, done that. And then I want to say my sophomore year, that's when Nick Lombardi came
yep,
back
remember
from
that.
Prolific Prep. So there was the whole, thing with him as well. So it
Yeah,
was,
I remember that.
yeah. So there is the whole hype around that. And, I think it would also, playing in AAU, like I always was just kind of a role player. Like
Yeah,
I was just kind of a catch and shoot, like could play off the bounce a little bit, but it was like that was kind of my role. Like it wasn't like to be like the featured guy or whatever. And so like, and we had Roselle who could do that and ended up going D1, at the end of the day. So it was,
yeah,
um, we had guys like that. So I would say I was just definitely more of a role player. And, Battle kind of shifted that, when he got there. It was like, now it's kind of your time. And, I
yeah,
think everyone kind of, most guys have to, wait their time. There's a lot of stuff I was able to take from them and, certain things, good and bad that, I didn't want to carry over into that next year.
yeah,
I think Battle did a good job of, establishing that culture once again once he got
yeah.
there, and everyone kind of fell in line with that as well. So
Roselle definitely had the cool jacket on a lot.
yeah, he might have.
I miss
There,
those
there
guys,
might have been
man.
a couple of guys. There might have been a couple of
That was a
guys,
couple, yeah, that was a couple of them.
but
But
nah,
yeah,
yeah, no, it was. That's just you learn to deal with certain people, not in a bad way, but I think it's been great for me in this
yeah,
experience is you start to be able to deal with a lot of different personalities and all that stuff from top guy to the bottom guy, and
yeah,
can really, there's a lot to take away and and learn from it, honestly, was the
yeah.
biggest thing.
Was that a was that an easy mentality shift going from a role player to now being the guy with the ball in their hands?
I think there's a part of it that I always probably wanted to be in that role. Like I knew what I was capable of, and
Yeah,
just having to wait my turn. Um, so I think there, and it was like, I played freshman as a varsity, and it was unfortunate that, Blair got hurt, at
yeah,
that time, but ended up, clearly helping. I was a guy who benefited from that as well.
yeah,
And so, I always wanted to be in that position. I knew what I was capable of, and I think it goes back to the work I was putting in. I was always confident that like when my time did come, like, I'd be able to handle that. So I think there's that aspect of just wanting to be in that role, but just, patiently waiting for, when my time did come.
yeah, yeah. And I think, it sucks that it happens that way sometimes, but like this is now an opportunity that like it's a chance for me to showcase what I can do, and
Yeah,
it's we
100%.
we can feel bad for other people, but at the same time, like, well, I got to take advantage of this now, and see
Yeah.
what we can do, because I think, it allows you to kind of get your feet wet as a freshman. I think that can only be helpful towards you as you progress in high school.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the high school journey. So yeah, then you get to college. Right, yeah. Start off by not playing too much, I guess as a freshman at Riverside, but then gradually progressing and playing more and more and more since balls in your hands, right? Like doing more of the heavy lifting, and then same thing once you get to Florida. What was that jump like going from Riverside to Florida in terms of like the competition? Because like you said, you went from, I don't want to say you weren't playing against grown men, but like SEC basketball, different story. So what was
Yeah, for
that? What
sure.
was that jump like?
I think it definitely helped me having that experience doing those 4 years at Riverside, being able to, be in a lot of different situations. I think helped when I got to that level because it's like, I've been trapped, I've been boxing one. Like there was a bunch of different defenses I saw, so there was a level to it, and it's like we had a bunch of guards who ended up going and playing high major. So it's like even though it was the Big West, there was still like talent. Like one guy, we had a lot of battles with over at UCSB, AJ. He's with the Thunder right now, and he's playing like minutes. So it's like
Uh-huh.
there's a bunch of guys who in that it was very good, like I feel guard based.
Okay.
So it's like once I got there, there was an element to I was used to it, but then it was like an element to where I was trying to fit in, how I fit in because it's like you start dealing with more personalities. A lot of kids probably been told how good they were, their whole lives, and being the guy from whatever school they're coming from. Um, and so forth. So for me, it took a second to like, I would say that was the biggest struggle was like, how do I fit in with these guys? And like really had to reflect on like, how can I help these guys?
Yeah.
And when I first got there, I'm like, damn, like you start questioning like, do you belong and all this stuff? Like
Yeah.
I mean, it gets pretty crazy. And it was, we had some guys who were playing well and stuff like that. But it was like, I think, once I kind of got acclimated, I was able to fit in and, I think Coach Gold and them were able to trust me, the more I got comfortable. I'd say that's like the biggest thing is just getting comfortable.
Was there a turning point, like you did something to practice or a moment that clicked where you're like, okay, like I got this.
I think I probably had a stretch of a few practices, where I was like, I can play, and then, because I was suspended the first 3 games for playing in Portsmouth. And after that, it was kind of like I was supposed to start, and then that didn't end up happening for a little bit. And I think once I played that first Florida State game, like having the crowd behind me and like all that, like and just the team, like that environment was crazy. And I was like, okay, like I feel I belong. Like now's the
Okay.
time, like through all the summer and all that stuff working, like I was like, I definitely feel I belong, and I was kind of excited to see where it went from there.
You played in some crazy environments down
Yeah.
there.
For sure.
I
Played in a couple.
yeah, gotta imagine it's a little different than Riverside, a little different than College Park.
Yeah, playing in full size arena was you're not used to those the smaller gyms, but now we had a couple in conference, but definitely it was a lot different playing those arenas and those fans I'd say were a lot more animated than before. So
Sure, yeah, and you guys got the gym packed during College Park days, so
yeah.
definitely used to it a little bit. But yeah, I gotta imagine like was that nerve-wracking at first? Was it exciting? Like what was that like when you first got into that SEC play and you're like, oh shit, there's like it's lit in here right now.
Yeah, nah, I think you just like I think it fuels you a little bit. Clearly helps. I got acclimated and comfortable pretty quick. But I think like even like now, like I kind of forget the crowd's even there, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Like, I kind of get so lost in the game that like you stop kind of like I don't really like pay attention to like what the fans and all that stuff are doing. Like I really just like lock in on like what's my assignment and what needs to be done. Because once I start thinking about all the other stuff, then I think it starts to impact your play negatively. So it's just I think just staying in the moment, and kind of just kind of the resource I've been having down in Memphis. I think that's the biggest thing. Is kind of where they say like be where your feet are.
yeah.
Really just trying to take that advice. So I think it's something I was able to carry, and have at those during those games.
Yeah, and I think that it could be overwhelming for a lot of people, especially the first time you experience it. There's all this extra stuff going on, like the crowd's yelling, like players are getting more hyped up. Who knows what the refs are doing, right? Like there's a lot of opportunity for your mind to just be drawn away from what you have to do.
Yeah.
Empty gym, full gym, either way, like here's what my job is right now. I got to focus on doing that one thing,
Yeah,
and
for
then
sure.
everything else will take care of itself. Have you? Did you learn that later on? Have you always been that way where it's like, yeah, there's a lot of extra stuff going on, but I just got to focus on my job, be where my feet are?
Yeah, I think I was able to develop it pretty early on. I'd probably say like in high school, I more so was like into like the crowd. I think it's like people around your age. Like I don't know, it was just a different kind of element. I feel like in high school, and then when I got to college, like you kind of start to lose sight, and it's like you're listening to what and all that stuff are saying. So it's like I think like when I reflected on like how do I, because I mean people would say like I played pretty poised or whatever. Like how did I do that? And I'd say like it's really just kind of staying in the moment and not thinking about too many extra things,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So I think
I,
it's definitely something I've had. in my time in college.
Because I mean, I definitely have that written down here to ask you about that, in terms of like where you excel at on the mental side of performance. Is like every time I watch you, even thinking back to high school, like you always just have this cool, calm, collected like demeanor to you.
Yeah.
I think there was one game, it might have been when Auburn came to your guys' house. I think you hit a three in someone's face, and like I saw you get a little animated. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I was okay. Okay, so he's got that he's got that in him. Uh,
Yeah.
I've always seen you as like, you never get too high on the good times, you never get too low if you have a couple turnovers in a row. Like it just seems like you're always just kind of having a steady mindset. Why do you
Yeah.
think that is such an important thing for like athletes to have? Not getting too highs on the highs, not getting too lows on the lows.
I think it's important because the more you start, I don't know what I was gonna say, but like I think the more you start thinking about those things, the highs and the lows, like the more like your emotions become attached to them. And I think like, I feel like the first time I really ever heard that like statement, like never get too high, never get too low, is from my AAU coach KP. And it's always something that kind of just stuck with me. And kind of something, I really try to like carry on through like my basketball journey. And it's, I've seen where, and I've learned like there's been like I'd say it's one game. Me and my uncle like kind of joke around a little bit, but like I'd say I got too like fixated on like trying to prove myself, and I didn't have anything to prove to the people we were playing, but
Yeah.
I end up having like my worst game ever. Like I'll still mark that down as my worst game ever. I'm not going to say which one, but if you went back in college and looked at a couple of box scores, you'd see which one it was. But for me, after that game, it was like, why that happened, and it was clearly because it was like I made the game more than it was.
Yeah.
And so like for me, it's like people are gonna make shots and do all this talking and stuff like that, and then you see a lot of guys who end up that they end up not performing after that. Like you end up and you look at the box score and it's like they missed their next five shots or whatever, didn't impact the game, after that. So that's why I kind of stay in that middle ground. And, I expect myself to make shots and make plays at the end of the day. And, some of the stuff's going to happen. And, I definitely get on myself because I have such a high expectation for myself and like holding myself accountable and knowing I'm capable of. But I'd say that's still something I still continue to try to work on, especially like, the lows. It's easy to get
Yeah.
down on yourself. And being in this stage where I'm at now, there's more expectation. It's a lot more cutthroat. So it's, there is more pressure than, college where it's like you're kind of guaranteed to be in a situation. Usually you finish out the year and you could transfer or whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like this is like your livelihood now. So it's,
Yeah.
it's a lot different. The stakes are a lot higher. But I think that's just what comes with being in this situation. So I know I'm capable of those things and kind of built for it. At the end of the day. So
But I think even in your situation, that's all the more reason why it's important just to kind of be level-headed as much as you can. Because if you
yeah.
have a stretch of like a bad game or two, I think it would be natural for someone to be like, "Oh, am I going to get cut, traded,
Yeah.
not play anymore now?" But I
Yeah.
think now if we start getting some people work well with their back against the walls for sure, but I think
Yeah.
more often than not, if I start playing that game of, well, I don't want to miss again, well, then now I'm not putting my best foot forward. I'm not doing what I need to do to be successful. And I think emotions will do that to you. I remember, I don't know
Yeah.
why this game sticks out. I know why it sticks out. I think it was my JV year. We were playing Campo, and I had first half. I went off. I knew I was doing good, but I didn't
Yeah.
want to know. I didn't want to know how good. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
someone told us. So people were telling me like, "Oh, dude, how many points do you have?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't care. Like, we got a
Yeah.
second half to play." And I remember the scorekeeper came up to me and was like, "Joey, you have 18 in the first half."
Yeah.
Second half, I think I went like 0 for 3 because I was like,
Yeah.
oh, am I about to get 30? Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it just like it takes you out of it. It takes you out of the moment because what I was doing to get those 18 points in the first half, I wasn't thinking about how many points I had. I
Yeah.
was doing my job and just playing. Then it
Yeah.
comes to a point where it's like, oh, if I make this, then I get 21. If I make this, then I get,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
now you're
for
going
sure.
away from what got you to that point, you know?
Yeah, no, I definitely been there, and that's kind of why I don't really bother. But it's like clearly at this stage, you can see up in the jumbotron,
It's there.
how many points you have and whatnot, and it gets different, the higher you get, and you kind of see, at this level, being in the G League, being in the NBA, like at the end of the day, the NBA, it's a stat driven league.
Yep.
If you're not putting up numbers, then you're probably not gonna have a job. As even if you're playing the right way, I think there's a balance to it for sure. But I think that's what some guys battle with is like I got to put up numbers and being so driven off, points and stuff like that because it's like, say you're averaging 8, but you're playing the right way, like it's kind of hard to justify, you being an NBA player. Say you're doing that in the G League, as well. So I think it gets interesting the older you get and like the higher you get, the level you get, just because it's like that's what, some guys might not be watching the games, but they go to the box score and say like, what do you have?
Yeah, and I think you'll see that on like Instagram or Twitter of a guy who played 20 minutes, had 0 points, 0 rebounds, zero
Yeah, yeah,
assists.
yeah, for
And it's
sure.
like, yeah, okay, like was he out there doing nothing? It's like, no, there's a lot more to the game for sure, but
Yeah.
it's easy to look at the box score and be like, oh, they played 20 minutes, have zero stats, they did nothing.
Yeah, for sure.
Which
So,
is unfortunate, right? Because like you said, you're playing the game the right way, you're doing what you have to do, but then that's ultimately kind of like what they look at.
no, definitely.
So yeah, so speaking of like the draft process, the G League, being up there with Memphis, like obviously you had some success uh in the G League, kind of doing your thing. I'm pretty sure you had a pretty monster triple double not too long ago.
Mhm.
Which was kind of cool to see. But I guess like now we're making the jump from college to the professional ranks. Like what was something like challenging about that process? I know you talked about how like it now becomes a business, but what was that
Yeah.
process like going from now college to doing things professionally?
Yeah. I'd say I learned the business quick. I think, I got the two-way with Miami,
Yep.
after the draft process and, you know, clearly excited about that, knowing that, I am in that situation. But you know, we went to summer league and I would say summer league clearly didn't go the way I envisioned or would have liked, put it that way. I could kind of feel it slipping a little bit and stuff like that. And, some guys played super well. And stuff like that. And clearly, I ended up being on the team that won the whole thing, which was a crazy experience. But after that, I ended up getting waived off my two-way. And if you look at the days, I think I probably had that contract for like 3 weeks.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so like that was super tough. Just because going through summer league, I could clearly feel it slipping. And like there was a couple of games like I was barely playing which was challenging, and stuff like that. So I ended up losing the contract. Ended up going signing an E10 with the Heat still. They were able to, they let me do the whole preseason and all that stuff, which, I'm super grateful for, and training camp and going to the Bahamas and playing with, being around the team. And just kind of learning from, guys like Jimmy, guys like Tyler, Bam,
Yeah.
and so forth. And so, I think getting to that point was challenging. I think I didn't expect to get cut in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And like I would say like that was probably, the tough start of, why I say it's like a business at the end of the day is because, they had to make a business decision. And, a guy like Josh Christopher, who ended up getting most valuable player in the thing, they ended up going with him, which he totally deserved. I didn't play well,
Yeah.
especially I didn't play the way I wanted to play. So, that was definitely tough. reflecting on it and stuff like that. So I'd say
You
that
got
was probably like
introduced
the
to the
biggest.
business quick.
Oh yeah, real quick. Real quick. It was nah, it was tough. It was tough. You start to question things and stuff like that, and kind of what you thought might have been the vision, things change. And that's kind of why I say, like, one day you could think you're good, and like the next day you're on to a whole nother situation.
Yeah, but then after that you got on with not the Memphis Hustle, uh wherever they're at.
The Sioux Falls.
That's right, yeah, yeah. So you got on with them. So like
Yeah.
what kept you going from getting cut to getting attached to that team now, right? Because I gotta imagine with that situation, like summer league minutes dwindled, you get cut almost immediately. Uh, sounds like it was, yeah, like yes, introduced to the business, but I don't want to say damaging, but probably pretty frustrating and
Yeah.
disappointed to go through that. But then you get on with this new team and you excel. So like, what do you think allowed you to kind of keep going in those moments?
Yeah, so I ended up, we talking with my agent and stuff like that. We had to figure out what was the best situation moving forward, and having a good conversation with the front office of the Heat. They're like, just come in and develop with the G League team. Their G League team is clearly the team I went to,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I got to go down to South Dakota. I'm Cali guy, so going to South Dakota is a little different.
Nope. No
Put it
shot.
that way. So, I think I got to Sioux Falls, and you know, it was definitely challenging in the beginning, and kind of, things fluctuate. Two ways are there, two ways aren't there. We had the showcase before, which, like, so like during that stretch, I think we play, say, 15 games up until a certain time. And like I think I was averaging probably like 8 points, 8, 9 points. And
Yeah.
so, like, clearly that's not going to get you anywhere. Because you got guys in the G League averaging 20,
Yeah.
18, like, having strong numbers. So it's like I clearly knew that wasn't going to get me to where I wanted to get to. And I continued to stay with Sioux Falls, and like it was definitely rough. Like, clearly I wasn't playing probably the way I would have liked to play and stuff like that. And like that's just the nature of the business. Like, you gotta find a role. And then, I think there was the whole Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero thing with the Rockets, I want to say, and the Thompson brother.
Hmm.
And I think one of them ended up getting suspended. And
Oh,
so,
that's
like,
right. Yeah,
and one of our two ways were supposed to come back down. And they ended up staying up. Like, they ended up keeping them just because they didn't know who was going to get suspended and all that stuff. And so like that ended up putting me, because I was coming off the bench. Like, I think
yeah,
it was
yeah,
a game or two I started, and then game or two I was coming off the bench for most of it. Um, they end up staying up, and like that's kind of when I had that role where I started. I think I was averaging like 26, and I don't know. I
yeah.
was
You
really
were going off. I remember that.
I was averaging like 28, 9 or something. I don't know. I don't know what the numbers are. But the two ways were up. So it was like we kind of had no choice but to play.
Yeah,
And so, like, I felt like I started kind of getting back to like my old ways, and like being able to play free. Just because it's like we don't have any bodies, and it's like we need to score, we need to do certain things. And so, I end up catching a rhythm, string together, I'd say a good 6, 7 games for the most part. And, by that time, I think, Memphis started kind of coming into the picture. And, was fortunate enough that, their front office, kind of took the chance on me, especially in that stretch of time, just because the beginning of the G League season, like I wasn't playing well. Like, I was probably just gonna be stuck in the G League the whole time, like
yeah,
on that contract. And then, just like that, that's the thing about, I guess that's the beauty and the curse about this industry is, how quickly things can change, whether that's for better or for worse. And so, I found myself going to Memphis, and quickly change like that. But I think that stretch of period and like, some things kind of clearly going right in my way and kind of like that staying ready for when that opportunity, just like, kind of we talked about when people went down with injuries before in high school and stuff like that. Like, I finally got that opportunity and kind of, just really try to make the most of it, while I could. So,
Yeah, and I think sometimes people get, that even that moment gets too big for them, right? Like
yeah,
these two people, they have to stay up, they can't get called back down. So like I have to play, and now I go into this mentality of like, this is my one chance, I can't mess this up, and then they end up
yeah,
messing it up, right?
yeah,
So it's
no, for
like,
sure.
I think it just shows kind of to your mental abilities that allow you to at least like perform up to your best. Because it sounds like that's kind of what it was. Like, this is my opportunity. I'm gonna go do me and see what happens. Versus like, hey man, this is like my one shot. Maybe there's a little bit of both,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like you said, it allowed you to be yourself.
For sure. And I think a lot of it went to just me staying prepared. Like regardless of whether the minutes were going my way or not, I always stayed in the gym. Like, I always try to make sure I was staying prepared for when that moment did come. Because I feel like there was a part where I started to like lose myself trying to like fit in and, fit that, fit the system and stuff like that. And I was finally able to figure some things out and just, staying prepared. And, for me, I was waiting for the moment. Like, I was, excited to clearly be in that position. Um, and so, just really try to make the most of it while I could. So
Yeah, if you stay ready, then when that moment comes, it's like okay, like just plug me in, coach. I'm ready to go. You know,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, just chomping at the bits. Just get me in there, man. Let me do my thing. Come on, I'm ready.
Yeah,
Hell
no,
yeah.
definitely.
One last thing I want to ask you about because I saw this actually when I was on the Riverside website, like uh, looking at your bio, but it had like your favorite quote on there, and it
Yeah.
said it said without struggle there is no glory.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? What does that mean to you?
I really just heard the quote and felt like it gravitated towards me a little bit. I think it's clearly a perfect testament of, what just happened to me now. Just the struggle, maybe not having the situation or whatever role you envision. I think there's a lot of tough times in Sioux Falls that, I kept to myself. And I think the people I had in my corner, just talking to them about it, and that's why I say it, it was big for me to keep, the circle I do have.
Yeah,
And I think there's been a lot of, moments where I've struggled and, at the end of the day, when I look back on it, it's clearly made me who I am, put me in the position, where I am now. And, it's definitely, you know, helped me in my development, grow as a basketball player and just a person in general. Like just my perspective on things, the way I think, like it's all shaped, who I am now. So I think just like going through those moments where I've struggled and, everyone's going to go through their own challenges has really, build some characters, what I like to describe it as. But, I think it's only made me a better person at the end of the day, whether that's, on the court or off the court and just the people it's introduced me to and just kind of the journey I've been on. So,
yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing. And, definitely being at Riverside when I heard the quote, like, the challenges as a freshman, you know, maybe not playing as much or playing and then not playing. And, you have, one or two ways you can either, get better from the situation or you can, kind of tuck your tail and, and be like, why is this happening to me and feel sorry for yourself. So, I think I definitely chose one of those routes and, just got better from it.
yeah. I think it's important to understand like you have a choice in which way you want to take that, right? Like I'm not playing where I can just kind of give up, or I could just focus on staying ready, getting better, and then kind of seeing what happens. You know,
Yeah.
um, I actually put out an episode yesterday, and I talked about something very similar. The quote was like, success or big wins are accompanied by, tough decisions, uncertainty, and then also great risk. So you got to be willing, if you want to play at like a high level and succeed, you got to be willing to play by those rules. If you don't, and you want to play at a lower level, that's fine. Like you'll be
Yeah.
fine down there, but you're not going to achieve like the heights that you probably want to. So I
Sure.
think understanding that like there is going to be struggle, It's not going to be easy, but it's only going to make it sweeter, you know, once we get there. Or I don't get there, but at least like I know I did what I could, so maybe it even makes that a little bit easier too.
No, definitely. That's definitely something that me and my uncle talk about a lot and stuff like that and just, stuff we carry. So it's, nothing in my life's ever been easy and, it's made me who I am at the end of the day. And, I've clearly, you know, from where I started and where people probably imagined being that kid that was number 37 on, the little NorCal, whatever
Yeah,
rankings to being, I'd say there's only two of us from that list that actually made it to, and the other kid was number one on that list. So,
yeah,
so I think it's, funny to look back on, kind of, where I started and, where we're at. And me and him just talk about that and joke around and laugh that, I mean, who would have expected, a guy like me to be in that situation.
yeah.
So,
I know you've talked a lot about self-reflection. I think, like, yeah, looking back at that for sure provides that motivation to keep going, right?
yeah,
But I think it'll also allows you like to appreciate the growth.
yeah, no,
You know,
definitely.
it's like here's where I started, here's where I'm at now, like with the mindset and the abilities I had, like we'll see what happens if I keep going.
Yeah,
I think it also
no,
probably shows that like you've been in, I don't want to say you've been in worse situations, but it's like, hey, like I've overcome the challenge of being 37th in my area and here I am. So like, oh, I'm not getting all the minutes I want. Well, like let me put in the work and see what happens.
yeah. At least that way I know at the end of the day, whether things go my way or they don't, or the way I would like them to. At the end of the day, I did everything, I thought would put me in a position to be successful at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm willing to live with. So, I think at the end of the day, you gotta live with your decisions, weigh the pros and cons, and make the best decision from there. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear that. Well, look, appreciate you hopping on and
for sure,
sharing your journey, from high school to the pros right now. That was awesome. Really appreciate you doing that.
for sure.
I know you said you had a lot of good nuggets here, but is there like what's one thing you want the listeners to leave with? Like a word of advice for them moving forward, based on your journey.
Um, am I talking to just athletes or people in general? Like just
I'll say people both. Like I know
yeah.
both athletes and non-athletes listen to this. So follow your heart, whatever you feel like going with.
I'd say just keep working. I think that's the biggest thing. That's the thing when I look on, what's gotten me in the situation I'm in, was the work. Like I could always rely and fall back on the work I put in and, trust that, I did things right. Like I didn't take shortcuts. I didn't try to take the easy way out or kind of going through the process. And so like, whatever you're gonna do, put your mind to it and just put your head down and work and live with the results from there, is the biggest thing. And at the end of the day, there's, because things at the end of the day, things are gonna go your way or they're not gonna go your way. So it's, you know, trusting that you did what you felt was best to put you in that position. It's clearly not as clean as I'd like to say it, but you know, I think that's the biggest thing. Whatever you put your mind to, just work at it, and hopefully you reap those rewards. So
Do the work, do the right thing, and just kind of deal with the consequences as they come. At least knowing that you did what you could.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's just how I try to go about things. Is you know, if you're in the situation you want to be in, continue to work. If you're not in the situation you see yourself in or would like to be in, like just continue to work and live with it from there. So.
yeah, man. No, no. Wise words there, now, man. Well, yeah. So I appreciate you hopping on. Where I know you're on Instagram. Is that the main place people can find you
Yep.
if they want to
That's
follow, see what Zion's up to?
there's not much going on. I'm a low key guy, but that's where you find me. Zyon Pullin. So
As I see all the yeah, I notice there's not a lot of posts coming from you, but the people at it or the people inviting you to share their stories, so that's how I keep my tabs
Yeah.
on you. But
No, for
yeah,
sure.
I'll put that in the description in case people want to see what you're up to. But yeah, thank you for hopping on, everybody. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, rate, share, review the podcast where you listen to. And don't forget today's a great day to make an impact on someone's life. All right, y'all. Have a good one. We'll talk soon.